I used to think that if I worked hard enough, they'd see me as more than just the adopted daughter, more than just the outsider they took in, but as someone worthy of being a true Hartwell. My name is Sophia Hartwell, and if you've ever heard of Hartwell Financial Group, the Wall Street powerhouse that manages billions in assets, you already know my last name. What you probably don't know is that I'm not a real Hartwell. I was adopted when I was 6 months old, a fact they never let me forget. I spent most of my childhood in boardrooms and charity galas, trailing behind my adoptive father and 2 older brothers like a ghost. While they discussed market strategies and billion-dollar deals, I was given busy work and told to observe quietly. My insights about digital trends were met with condescending pats on the head. "You're eager," they'd say, the word dripping with the same dismissal you'd use for a child showing you their finger painting. But I never pushed back. I took every unpaid position, every thankless task, every weekend project they assigned me. I learned every algorithm, mastered data analytics, and understood the digital landscape better than their entire tech team. At 23, I was the only one in the family with both an MBA from Berkeley and a track record of successful startup investments. At 24, I was restructuring their digital division, but achievements meant nothing if blood didn't flow through your veins. The first time I suggested incorporating AI-driven strategies at our quarterly summit, a proposal to revolutionize our client services, my adoptive father cut me off mid-presentation. "You're not one of us, Sophia," he announced, his voice carrying across the conference room filled with industry leaders. The room fell silent. I felt my breath catch. "What do you mean?" He didn't even glance up from his tablet. "This empire was built by Hartwells, for Hartwells. You're capable, I'll give you that, but this isn't your birthright. You don't have our blood." Marcus, my oldest adoptive brother, smirked from his seat. Eleanor, my adoptive mother, suddenly found her manicure fascinating. Not one board member spoke up, not even Thomas, who had whispered just last week that I was the future of the company. "You're too idealistic," Benjamin continued, as if explaining something to a child. "You think technology can solve everything, but you don't understand legacy. That's not leadership, Sophia. That's naivety." My throat tightened. This summit was meant to be my moment. I had spent months developing an AI integration plan, complete with predictive analytics, cost projections, and potential partnerships with Silicon Valley giants. But all they saw was the charity case they'd taken in, playing pretend in their world. Later that evening, as I sat in my corner office, the one without my name on the door, Benjamin entered without knocking. "You know," he said, adjusting his cufflinks like we were discussing the weather, "Marcus and Blake aren't visionaries, but they understand what it means to be a Hartwell. You were always trying too hard to belong." I felt a bitter laugh escape. "You mean I actually had ideas for the future?" Benjamin's eyes turned cold. "I mean someone who thinks algorithms are the same as authority. Pathetic girl, you were never the brilliant one. You just tried harder to prove you belonged." That line still cuts deep. Pathetic girl, you were never the brilliant one. He walked out without another word, and I sat there staring at my reflection in the darkened monitor. The office felt hollow, sterile, but for the first time, I didn't feel tears forming. I felt clarity. If they wouldn't accept me at their table, then fine. I'd create my own empire. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't scramble for their approval. I would leave, and I would build something so revolutionary, so dominant, that one day they'd regret every word. They didn't know it then, but that was the last time they'd ever dismiss me as inferior. They had erased me from their future, but what they didn't realize was that I'd already begun coding my own destiny. You'd think after everything Benjamin said, I'd just resign quietly. Maybe I should have. But I was still clinging to hope that if I proved myself one more time, with something groundbreaking, they'd finally see my worth. So I did what any pathetic girl who was never the brilliant one would do. I pushed harder. I spent weeks crafting a digital transformation proposal that could have revolutionized Hartwell Financial. I analyzed AI trends, blockchain applications, and automated trading systems. I had identified our opportunity, a fully integrated digital wealth management platform. No other traditional firm had cracked it yet. It was the future, and I knew exactly how we could dominate. I developed an entire strategy, user interface designs, revenue projections, partnership frameworks. I even brought in connections from my Berkeley network for technical validation. I reserved the executive boardroom and sent calendar invites to the leadership team. I still remember how my fingers trembled advancing through my presentation. I still remember how they all checked their phones instead of watching. And I especially remember how Benjamin smiled when I finished, not with pride or even curiosity, but that condescending curve he saved for people who overstepped. When I concluded, silence filled the room. I glanced at my adoptive brothers, both slouched in their leather chairs like they were enduring a mandatory training. Thomas, my adoptive uncle, scrolled through emails, completely disengaged. Benjamin was the only one who spoke. "Is that all?" he asked. I nodded, uncertain. He sighed dramatically, then turned to Marcus. "Marcus, why don't you educate your sister on why this would destroy our reputation within a quarter?" Marcus chuckled. "Sophia, no offense, but this isn't Silicon Valley. You can't just throw tech jargon into PowerPoint and call it strategy. AI platforms? Digital disruption? Do you think our clients are 20-something crypto bros?" The room filled with muted snickers. "But this isn't theoretical," I insisted, pulse racing. "The data shows?" "Data misleads," Benjamin interrupted. "Experience doesn't. And my experience tells me this entire presentation is amateur hour. You want to play tech CEO? Fine. But not with our legacy. This is a real institution, not your startup playground. Benjamin, please, just listen." "No," he said, rising from his chair. "You want to innovate? Do it elsewhere. Start your own company. See how far you get without the Hartwell name. But don't stand here pretending you're one of us because you're not. You never were." That phrase again, "not one of us." I scanned the room, hoping for support. Anyone. But all I found were smirks, suppressed chuckles, and uncomfortable glances at their phones. Eleanor wasn't even present. She'd stopped attending board meetings years ago. I collected my materials without a word. As I reached the door, Blake leaned back with that insufferable grin. "Hey, if the tech thing doesn't pan out, I saw a social media manager position at a makeup company. You could help them with their Instagram filters." More laughter filled the room. And in that moment, I understood this wasn't my family anymore. Not in any way that mattered. I wasn't their daughter, their sister, or their peer. I was an interloper wearing their name like borrowed clothes that never fit. I held it together until I reached my apartment. Then the dam broke, the shame, the fury, the betrayal. It crashed over me in waves, years of being silenced, overlooked, and diminished. Years of being told to be thankful for whatever crumbs they offered. I wanted to scream, to expose their ignorance. But I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop. I submitted my resignation that night without explanation. I walked away from that dynasty, that stifling expectation of being grateful but never equal. I abandoned the boardroom I was never truly welcome in and stepped into uncertainty. I relocated to a city where Hartwell meant nothing, where I wasn't Sophia Hartwell, the adopted daughter who didn't belong, but just Sophia, a woman with ambition, talent, and nothing left to prove to them. And in that small loft overlooking the Hudson River, listening to the city's endless hum, I opened a new document. No corporate logo, no board approval, no condescending smiles. Just me in the first line of code for something they'd never see coming. There's something empowering about being dismissed. It grants you the advantage of stealth, and when you're invisible, you can strike without warning. In that modest loft with exposed brick and unreliable Wi-Fi, I laid the groundwork for something none of them would believe I could create. I didn't have their connections, but I had something better: focus. No more seeking validation from people who'd already written my story. No more asking permission. I named the company Cipher Digital, a reference to the hidden patterns in data that most people overlook. Invisible to the untrained eye, but containing all the answers. The early months were harsh. My savings dwindled quickly. I survived on takeout and coded through the night. I pitched to small businesses, startup founders, even influencers building personal brands. Most declined. But some said yes, and I treated those accounts like Fortune 500 clients. I started small, custom AI-driven marketing campaigns for tech startups hungry for rapid growth. It was a niche, and I knew the demand was exploding. I handled everything myself: strategy, analytics, client relations. I wore every hat because failure wasn't an option. I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted to dominate them. And I wanted to do it without their blessing. Within a year, I had 7 full-time developers, a modern office space in Soho, and a client roster that included 3 unicorn startups. The company was still flying under the radar, not big enough for TechCrunch headlines, but generating buzz in Silicon Alley. We kept our profile low intentionally. The Hartwells had no idea I was even still in finance-adjacent tech. What they couldn't realize, was that Cypher wasn't just another digital agency. It was their replacement. I monitored Hartwell Financial religiously. It wasn't difficult. They were still making Bloomberg appearances, still pushing traditional wealth management models, and ignoring the digital revolution. They were riding on their reputation, like they always had. And they were oblivious to how rapidly their industry was transforming. So I got tactical. I recruited a data scientist who used to work at Goldman Sachs. We developed an AI platform that directly targeted the clients Benjamin had always dismissed: millennials with crypto portfolios, female entrepreneurs, international investors seeking transparency. Our approach was algorithmic, personalized, and transparent, everything Hartwell Financial was not. But I didn't stop there. We started competing, discreetly, for mid-tier hedge fund analytics contracts. Some of the same accounts Benjamin's firm used to secure with a handshake. Except now, they were losing to a nameless startup with superior algorithms and real-time execution. They didn't know who we were, and I preferred it that way. Behind the scenes, I started recruiting their talent. The brilliant ones. The undervalued ones. Quant analysts, developers, client managers who had stories like mine. People who were tired of being overlooked. People who wanted to work somewhere that valued innovation over bloodlines. And one by one, they joined me. Our quiet revolution was gaining momentum, and they still hadn't noticed. There was a moment, about 18 months in, when I sat across from a prominent venture capital firm. They were choosing between Hartwell's new digital initiative and us. I'd seen Benjamin's pitch: conservative, outdated, desperately trying to seem modern. And then they reviewed mine. "Who are you?" the partner asked, studying our demo. "This is revolutionary. It's intuitive. It's what we didn't know we needed until now." I smiled. Just someone with everything to prove. We secured the contract. By the end of that quarter, we had beaten Hartwell Financial on 3 major deals. Each victory pulling them further from their comfort zone. Their name didn't command the same respect anymore. Their influence was waning. And I was only warming up. Still, I remained silent. Let them dismiss me. Let them joke in their oak-paneled offices about the upstart firm that kept outmaneuvering them, oblivious to who was orchestrating it. Let them think I had disappeared. Become irrelevant. Forgettable. Because by the time they finally discovered who they were fighting, it would already be over. Hartwell's decline. They say pride comes before the fall, but in Benjamin's case, it was pride that built the fall algorithm by algorithm. From the outside, Hartwell Financial still looked like Wall Street royalty. Glass tower on Park Avenue, CNBC appearances, ads in The Economist. But inside, the infrastructure was crumbling. And I could see the system errors from miles away. It started with a lost client, a tech IPO they'd been courting for months. The founders walked away last minute, citing philosophical differences. But I knew the real reason. We'd offered better analytics, faster execution, and actually understood their business model. Then came the resignations. At first, just a few junior analysts. Then the veteran head of digital strategy. Then their lead quantitative researcher, someone so devoted he'd named his dog bull market. When he reached out to me through LinkedIn, I didn't gloat. I just sent him our offer letter. Welcome to Cypher. The real blow came 6 months later. Hartwell Financial lost a government pension fund contract, a massive, multi-billion-dollar mandate. One they'd assumed was guaranteed. One they hadn't even properly pitched for because they believed the Hartwell name still meant something. But the world had evolved. Institutions wanted transparency, innovation, real-time reporting. And Cypher delivered all three. I watched their PR team scramble through damage control, blaming market disruption and changing regulatory environments. They didn't name us, of course. They didn't know it was me. But they were starting to feel our presence in their profit margins. I could see it in their desperation. Their once dignified LinkedIn presence started posting buzzword salads, copying our content strategy, stealing our hashtags, even launching a rushed digital transformation division that felt like a bad Silicon Valley parody. I almost laughed when I saw their announcement. They were trying to catch a shadow. And the shadow was already 3 steps ahead. Whispers started circulating through Manhattan's financial district. Talk of missed earnings, internal power struggles, liquidity concerns. I didn't start them. I didn't need to. I just let them multiply. Truth spreads fastest when fear is the catalyst. And the Hartwells were starting to sweat. One afternoon, I attended the Global FinTech Summit. I wasn't speaking or sponsoring, just observing. Someone curious to see how Hartwell Financial would position themselves now that they weren't the industry standard. They had a booth in the auxiliary hall. Smaller than previous years. Less traffic. Benjamin wasn't there, but Marcus and Blake were, forcing smiles through their visible anxiety. I kept my distance, just close enough to observe. A prominent venture capitalist approached them, someone I'd pitched to just days earlier. "Thanks," he said dismissively when Marcus offered him a glossy brochure. "I'm already working with Cypher Digital. They're revolutionizing the space." Marcus maintained his practiced smile. "Cypher Digital?" The man nodded. "You should look them up. They're doing things you wouldn't believe." And then he walked away. Marcus's facade cracked instantly. He turned to Blake. "Who the hell is Cypher Digital?" I smiled behind my conference badge. The reckoning had begun. But the real moment, the turning point, came on a rainy Thursday morning. I was in my office, reviewing our expansion into Asian markets, when my assistant knocked. "There's something you need to see," she said, her face pale. She handed me her iPad with an open article. The headline read, "Hartwell Financial under SEC investigation for alleged market manipulation and client fraud." It wasn't just a hit piece. It was an exposé. The article detailed falsified returns, hidden losses, preferential treatment for family accounts, and toxic internal culture. Including anonymous sources from within the company. Former employees, certainly. Even a few I had quietly recruited to Cypher. Benjamin's empire was hemorrhaging. And Wall Street had just smelled blood. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just closed the article, leaned back in my chair, and took a measured breath. This was never about revenge. It was about truth. About showing them, and the world, that I had never been the pathetic girl. That I wasn't naive. I wasn't too idealistic. I wasn't an outsider playing pretend in their world. I was an innovator. And while they were busy dismissing me, I was building a future without them. But what none of them expected was that future was about to become very public. Because the world was about to learn my name. And so were they. There are moments that split your life in two. Before and after. For me, it happened on a quiet Monday morning over green tea and a vibrating phone. I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of reviewing code for our latest platform update, an AI wealth advisor that was already in beta with 3 major banks, when my assistant burst in, her expression stunned. "Sophia," she said breathlessly, holding out her phone. "You're trending." I blinked. "What?" She turned the screen toward me, and there it was, Sophia Hartwell, tech prodigy and adopted daughter of financial dynasty, revealed as CEO behind Cipher Digital. My pulse quickened. It wasn't just a tech blog post. It was everywhere. Bloomberg, TechCrunch, The Wall Street Journal. Even Good Morning America had picked it up. One headline stood out among the rest: "The Invisible Heiress, How an Adopted Daughter Built the AI Platform Disrupting Her Family's Empire." I didn't even have to read the article. I already knew the narrative they were crafting. A girl cast out from her adoptive family's legacy, dismissed for her bloodline, only to emerge with a company that threatened their existence. There were quotes from former Hartwell employees, screenshots from my Stanford AI conference keynote, photos of me at Cipher's new headquarters, all glass and algorithms. Everything Hartwell Financial wasn't. And then came the devastating comparison: their quarterly losses beside our exponential growth. It wasn't subtle. The media had declared war for us. My phone exploded. Emails flooded in. Reporters. VCs. Congratulations from people I hadn't heard from since Berkeley. But the message that stopped me cold wasn't from any of them. It was from Eleanor. One line: "Benjamin saw the news. He's locked himself in his study." I stared at the screen. Not out of guilt. Not even vindication. Just emptiness. For years, he had insisted I wasn't one of them. For years, I had believed that proving him wrong would heal something inside me. But in that moment, watching the world celebrate what he'd tried so hard to deny, I realized something crucial: I didn't need his acceptance anymore. That same afternoon, my publicist confirmed the details. A televised interview had been requested. National coverage. Prime time. "Do you want to do it?" she asked. I hesitated. I hadn't built Cipher for the spotlight. I'd built it for independence. But maybe it was time to speak. I nodded. "Let's do it." The interview aired 3 days later. I wore a charcoal gray suit. Sophisticated. Modern. No designer labels. No bitter declarations. Just confidence. The host opened with the story of my meteoric rise. How Cipher Digital had become a stealth disruptor, revolutionizing financial AI in under 3 years. And then she asked the question everyone was waiting for. "Is it true that you're the adopted daughter of Benjamin Hartwell?" I met her eyes directly. "Yes." "Why keep it secret?" "I didn't keep it secret," I said. "I just stopped asking for permission to exist." She paused. "And now you've built a company that's disrupting theirs?" "It's not about disruption," I replied, though we both knew it was. "It's about creating technology that serves people who've been overlooked by traditional finance." The interview ended with thunderous applause from the live audience. That night, Cipher's servers crashed from traffic. We received over 500 partnership inquiries. Our valuation doubled overnight. And Silicon Valley started whispering about our Series C. But while the tech world celebrated my emergence, I knew there was one place where silence reigned. The Hartwell family group text. Still active but eerily quiet. No passive-aggressive comments. No dismissive memes. Just silence. Until one message finally appeared. From Marcus: "You betrayed us." I didn't reply. Not then. What could I say? They had used my invisibility to pretend I was nothing. And now, the world knew better. The reveal had changed everything. Not because it gave me power, but because it forced them to see what they had spent a lifetime denying: me. Sophia Hartwell. The one they said would never belong. Never matter. Never be more than an adopted charity case. And now, I was the youngest female tech CEO in the country. But I still had one final step left. One final chapter. And it would begin at the charity gala. The invitation arrived like nothing had changed. A cream-colored card with gold lettering. Hartwell Foundation Annual Gala. Saturday at 7 p.m. The Metropolitan Club. No personal note. No acknowledgement. Just protocol. I studied it for a while, letting the irony sink in. For years ago, they humiliated me in boardrooms. Told me I wasn't true family. Called me pathetic. Now, they were inviting me back into their world. The world that, in every way, had made it clear I was an outsider, not an heir. I hadn't attended since the day I left. But this year, I accepted. Not for them. For closure. That Saturday, I arrived at the Metropolitan Club in a matte black Tesla Model S Plaid. The silence of the electric engine felt appropriate. Fitting, really, for the girl they had once tried to silence. The valet recognized me instantly, eyes widening as he hurried to take my key. The entrance was flanked by luxury vehicles, Mercedes, Maseratis, a vintage Rolls-Royce. But mine was the only Tesla. I stepped out deliberately, wearing a sleek black gown. No jewelry. No ostentation. Just understated power and the kind of presence that commands attention without demanding it. As I ascended the marble steps, the whispers began. Heads turned. Conversations died. They all saw me. Finally saw me. But no one seemed to know how to react. I entered the ballroom like I belonged there because I did. Whether they accepted it or not. Eleanor was the first to approach, her eyes uncertain, and for a moment, I saw something that almost resembled guilt. "You look stunning," she murmured. "Thank you," I said. Then quietly, "Let's not pretend this changes anything." She offered a fragile smile. "Of course." Inside, the gala continued. Philanthropists. Board members. Old family associates. My adoptive brothers stood near the bar, freezing mid-drink when they saw me. Marcus's face hardened. Blake's eyes darted to my wrist, then the minimalist watch, a limited edition smartwatch my company had developed. I didn't pause to acknowledge them. I walked directly toward the terrace, where Benjamin stood alone, staring out at the Manhattan skyline like an emperor watching his city burn. He turned when he heard my heels on the marble. And for the first time in my life, Benjamin Hartwell looked vulnerable. We stood in silence for a moment. "You came," he finally said, his voice subdued. "I did." He examined me. "You've made quite an impact." I remained silent. He looked away, his voice tight. "Sophia, I may have misjudged you." That almost made me laugh. May have misjudged. But I didn't come for apologies. I came for finality. He faced me again. "The company's hemorrhaging. Your brothers." He paused. "We need your expertise." I met his gaze, calm, composed. Not bitter anymore. Just resolved. "You said I was never the brilliant one," I replied evenly. "Just a pathetic girl who didn't understand legacy." He didn't deny it. "Now," I said, gesturing subtly toward the ballroom, the gala, the crumbling dynasty, "you want my help?" His mouth opened, but I continued. "I'm not here to save you, Benjamin. I built something without you. While you were dismissing me, I was innovating. While you were excluding me, I was becoming everything you said I'd never be." He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Perfect. I turned to leave, but before I did, I looked back. "You were right about one thing," I said. "I'm not like you. And I'm grateful for that." As I walked back through the ballroom, people stepped aside instinctively. Whispers. Furtive glances. A few nervous smiles. But I didn't need their approval. I wasn't there to prove anything anymore. I had already transcended. Outside, the Tesla waited silently under the evening lights. I slid into the driver's seat, engaged the autopilot, and glanced back once. Not at the building. But at the desperate girl I used to be. The one who fought so hard to belong. And I smiled. Because she wasn't fighting anymore. She was thriving. And from that day forward, the world would never forget her name. Sophia Hartwell. Not the adopted daughter. Not the outsider. Not the pathetic girl. Just the woman who rewrote the algorithm and ensured no one like her would ever be erased again.